Now on Indianapolis This Week.
The potential to be one of the most consequential sessions of our state legislature.
Our one-on-one with Governor Mike Pence about the huge changes from 2014, from same-sex marriage to education, and what about his future?
Will you seek a second term as governor?
Plus, could your child's textbook bill be a thing of the past? And Hoosier health care options, a Sunday exclusive with the Secretary of Health and Human Services.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
Thanks for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. We start with the state's top elected leader, Governor Mike Pence. The governor is ending a year that has seen a great deal of change and controversy. And that includes federal court decisions throwing out Indiana's ban on same-sex marriage and the political squabbles with state school superintendent Glenda Ritz over control of the state's education plans. This week, I sat down with a one-on-one with the governor, starting with the one question that has cast a shadow over every move he's made.
Governor, let me just ask you your two favorite questions. Can I do that? The questions that you can never escape. I think I even asked these of you when you're Skyping around the world. Number one, Governor, will you seek a second term as governor?
You know, we're certainly taking steps to be able to seek a second term as governor of the state of Indiana. But our focus right now is really on the upcoming session of the General Assembly and doing all that we can to build on the momentum that Indiana is experiencing in our economy and in our schools. And so I'm going to stay focused on the upcoming session of our state legislature. And after that adjourns, my family and I will sit down and reflect and pray about where we might best serve and make decisions about our future at that time.
And as you know, the longer you wait, the harder it becomes because you are sort of the heir apparent to be a second-term governor. So do you have to keep in mind that you have to make a decision, even with the legislature, in a quick fashion so that if you don't decide to run and just to decide to do something else, that you have to give that other woman or man a chance? Do you keep that in mind?
Well, I understand there's
a time.
There's always some interest in politics in and around the public debate, but I think Hoosiers want to see us focused on their future and not ours. And this upcoming session of the General Assembly, I think, has the potential to be one of the most consequential sessions of our state legislature in recent times. I mean, we have one of the strongest balance sheets in the country. We have strong reserves. We've got an economy that's growing, that's on the move. We've really laid the foundation for the kind of education reforms that'll create more opportunities for kids regardless of where they start in life and regardless of where they want to start in life. And in this coming session, as I described in unveiling our education agenda last week, I really do believe this should be an education session and focusing on how we achieve a goal of moving 100,000 more kids into B or better schools by 2020. I think is and should remain the focus of our energies and the focus of the upcoming session of the legislature.
Here in our state, we saw a tsunami of change when it came to same-sex marriage, and you have held your position very clear on the principle of one man, one woman. Does the Supreme Court need to revisit that, or is this a done deal? Is this an issue that should just move on?
Well, people who know me well know that I'll always believe in traditional marriage. I believe marriage is between one man and one woman. But I also will respect the rule of law. And the courts have spoken with regard to Indiana at this moment, and we're respecting that in our administration. But I think the Supreme Court would do well, now that there's different opinions in different federal courts, to resolve this issue. And when they do, I hope that the Supreme Court will allow the people and not unelected judges to make decisions in this area.
There should be a referendum on this issue then?
Well, I think the Supreme Court would do well to recognize when it comes to institutions of such importance in our society that we do well when we allow the people of our states to make decisions about those institutions. But at the end of the day, people know where I stand. Sure. And Indiana will respect the rule of law and respect our courts.
On the issue of the superintendent of public instruction, you are not the first and not the last to maybe suggest that position at some point become a an appointed position as opposed to an elected position. Under your leadership, will that happen? Will you push the legislature to considering the squabbling and the issues that have occurred in recent months? Does that position need to change?
Well, that's not on my agenda. What we proposed last week, in the wake of some real difficulty and friction at the highest levels of education in Indiana, was really two things. Number one, the office that I established, the Center for Education and Career Innovation, was really created to promote greater collaboration between not only K-12 education, but also higher education, and also adult workforce. And I'm proud of the work that office has done, but I also became aware that it had become a source of controversy and some friction with the Department of Education. So I made a decision, which we acted on last week, Rafael, to unilaterally dissolve the Center for Education and Career Innovation.
Is that a tough decision to make? It seems to me that for the governor who creates something to then say, you know what I've created may not be working, isn't sometimes political savvy. So is that a strong thing for you to say, look, maybe I wasn't right, maybe this didn't work out?
Look, I'm proud of the work the Center for Education and Career Innovation did, but I think part of leadership is listening and learning and continuously evaluating what's working and what's not. And I just thought someone needed to take the first step to restore harmony and to restore trust at the highest levels of education in Indiana. So we made that decision. In connection with that, I am calling on the General Assembly to allow the Republicans and Democrats who volunteer their time on the State Board of Education to be able to elect their chair. Now, the vast majority of boards and commissions that I appoint elect the person that serves as their chair. And the balance of them, I actually appoint the chair. But in this case, I think in the interest of restoring trust and harmony and greater efficiency on the State Board of Education, we ought to let the men and women from around the state, educators, Republicans and Democrats, to be able to choose that person on the basis of consensus who they think is best equipped to lead the State Board of Education, so that we can all move forward together and really accomplish the goal of improving education for all of our kids.
Governor, in my remaining time, two issues I want to ask you. The $2 billion surplus, how much of that money will you allow to be spent? We have it in the rainy day fund. Can we draw down any monies out of that fund, or will you be very cautious of how that money is spent?
Well, let me say, I think our fiscal integrity is the foundation of our prosperity. And since I became governor, unemployment has dropped from over 8% to 5.7% today. We've seen tens of thousands of jobs created in Indiana, and our labor force is growing by tens of thousands. All of that begins with having a strong balance sheet. I mean, businesses that make decisions to grow in Indiana or move to Indiana, first and foremost, look at that balance sheet. So making sure that we have strong and adequate reserves will be of paramount importance as we craft our budget. But the good news is, with a growing economy and with a strong budget, we're going to be able to make increased investments in our schools, increased investments in our priorities around the state, and still maintain those reserves.
At what level will you allow the spending to occur, though? $2 billion, is 1.5 enough in the rainy day fund? I mean, how much money is okay to keep in that fund and spend?
Well, when I applied for the job, I said I thought reserves of about 12.5% of annual spending was about right, and I think there's two things about the budget that ought to happen. Number one is the reserves. You ought to have dollars set aside in the event of a downturn. That prevents a tax increase on individuals and businesses in the future. But the other part is actually even more important. And that is, I don't think the state government's budget should ever grow faster than the family budgets of the people of Indiana. And so we'll do what we did before. We'll hold the line on spending and make sure that the state budget doesn't grow any faster than the average rate of inflation over the last 10 years. It's that commitment to common sense, fiscal responsibility that's been the foundation of our prosperity in Indiana, and I look forward to this coming budget session to hit that mark one more time.
Our thanks to Governor Pence. In the next few days, he'll make a 9-day trip to Israel over the holiday season, which his office is calling a cultural and jobs mission. Coming up, our insiders weigh in on what Governor Pence had to say about his future and the new struggle with Superintendent Glenda Ritz next on Indianapolis This Week. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week as we bring back in our political insiders, Laura Beck, Abdul Hakim Shabazz, and former political and State House reporter with the Indianapolis Star, Mary Beth Schneider. Welcome back.
Thank you. You talked to the governor for how long? 8 minutes and 35 seconds. So did we learn anything new?
Actually, yes. I think we did because I spoke to the governor shortly after Rafael and the RTV6 team did. And I thought it was interesting that we finally know at least when to expect a final close on the presidency, which will be after session. We expect the governor to make a formal announcement one way or the other, whether he's going to run for president. That I thought was the most interesting because that's more he's actually said at any other point in time about the whole presidency.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that he's, running for president. I think what's interesting, though, is that, I do read Abdul's tweets, and so I did find out that, that he is going to do this after session. It's these end-of-the-year type interviews can be very formulaic. I mean, you sat in on these many years, and you did, too. What I find is just there's this astonishing lack of substance in that interview. I mean, there's a lot of platitudes. There's a lot of, we're the best state, we're the state that works, and that's great, and maybe that's what Hoosiers want to hear at the end of the year. But as we're heading into this legislative session, I think it would have been good to maybe hear some things that are more of substance.
But he also talked about that on the issue of same-sex. He thought that the Supreme Court should take this up and that the Supreme Court should say, states, you take care of it. I mean, he was very definite about that.
Well, yeah, because that gets Republican conservative voters out to vote, particularly in a year when he's on the ballot and he wants more people to vote.
Well, let's take a look at the Washington Post, because they had a full profile of Governor Pence where he lays out his vision for what 2016 campaign would look like. The Post headline even going so far as to ask if Pence is the GOP next Ronald Reagan. He calls himself a solutions conservative, and he says he hasn't ruled out that presidential run. In fact, since taking office in January of last year, Governor Pence has made 5 international trips, as you know, Japan last year, and this year, Germany, the United Kingdom, Canada, and soon he'll head off to Israel. Mary Beth, is he running for president?
I think he's running to keep his options open. Lightning could strike. There are some, 20 Republicans out there who all think they're the next Ronald Reagan. And I think the leader in the polls probably has about 10% support, so it's totally wide open. But if he really wants to be president, he is doing a lot of stuff, but what he isn't doing that we haven't seen yet is organizing. We don't know of anybody yet that's starting to line up people in Iowa and New Hampshire. I haven't seen any signs that he's doing things like figuring out how to get on the ballot in 50 states. There's a lot to do if he wants to do this.
But he has been to Iowa, he has been to New Hampshire, and if he does make the decision right, he also can't run for governor, right? It's one or the other.
But the one thing to keep in mind, too, is that if Mike Pence was a clear sign that he'd be running for president was whether he would have taken over the head of the Republican Governors Association. It was he was sort of next in line, turned it down. And that would have been
because he was the Cook Brothers shadow operation.
No, but that would be the perfect platform for him to run, for president, as the head of the RGA.
Actually, some people think it's just the opposite. Yeah. You don't want to be tied down trying to elect Republican governors when you're trying to elect yourself.
I think, too, with someone like this, I think he's trying to do something that is unorthodox in a way. So it doesn't surprise me that he would turn down that chairmanship of the RGA. What's so interesting too about Mike Pence is he's a conservative firebrand. He really is. And when he was in Congress, I mean, we saw him out on the steps, screaming, let's shut down Planned Parenthood. Let's do that. As governor, he is so restrained.
Yeah, Rafael's interview did not scream firebrand.
No, absolutely not. And so to me, he's really trying to appeal to a broader base.
Can he really be a firebrand? I mean, can he be a Rush Limbaugh if someone in talk radio host. If someone in Colorado?
I mean, the number one thing they teach you in radio talk show host school is know your audience, know who you're talking to.
So
and the audience for a congressman is a lot different creature than the audience for a governor. My audience is all the great people who watch us every Sunday morning at 8:30 and then replay at noon.
So who is his audience?
I would argue that right now, the governor has 2 audiences. Obviously, it's the people of Indiana, but also he knows that he's being looked at the national stage. In Indiana, despite the best efforts of my Democratic Democratic friends, is a model, for surpluses, for job growth.
So who's the audience?
The audience is the national people who will be looking for a presidential candidate in 2016, and Mike Pence is staying on their radar screen.
So let's talk about education now. Glenda Ritz going before lawmakers, fighting for a key part of her agenda next year, and something so many parents have hoped for, the elimination of textbook fees. Katie Hines is following that for us right now.
Ritz is asking for a 3% increase in funding for public schools. She also wants the state to cover the cost of textbook rentals for all students. It's an idea that met criticism from the Budget Committee Chair, Senator Luke Kenley. And it's unclear who will control the State Board of Education's budget moving forward. Ritz is asking for the budget to be moved back to the Department of Education. The governor dissolved the agency that had oversight last week. It's evidence of a continuing political power struggle among Ritz, Governor Mike Pence, and the board. In a move that would strip Ritz's power, Pence recently announced he'll ask lawmakers to allow the board to elect its own chair.
I am moving ahead, moving forward. The politics of things and the governance of things, as to how that works, I think will be a discussion, a broad discussion, even broader than that, than whether I'm the chair or not in the General Assembly, and I look forward to having that conversation.
Ritz says she's requested information from the governor's office on all of the education proposals that he announced at the legislative conference last week.
Thank you, Katie, very much.
I thought one of the interesting things of your interview with the governor was what he didn't say. You're asking about education agenda and whether to have an unelected, appointed superintendent. He said, well, that's not on my agenda. Well, he didn't answer, would he support that if that makes it through the legislature, and how much will he cut her off at the knees, basically?
I did ask the governor, would he support not necessarily making an appointed position in this session, but in 2020. And even then he said, no, that's not where his focus is. It's on, the continued education reform. So, but I know there is legislation out there that would make it an appointed position come 2020, so everybody can get reelected.
You get the last word.
I was going to say that's not on his agenda, but he's got a supermajority in both chambers, so I would certainly hope they could get that done for him. Yeah, I think they're going to try and cut Glenda Ritz off at the knees as much as they can. But the problem is every time they do that, that just galvanizes her supporters more than
just like they got galvanized in the last election. She was 3 for 20.
Do we have the money for the textbooks? Because as a parent, I would love not to have to pay for my son's biology books, but I pay it every year. Is the money there?
We've got a major surplus, which government agencies have been shifting back. So
the money is there. We just need to spend more money in the classroom and less money on administrators.
Well, that's spending it in the classroom.
The debate will continue. They really do love each other. I want you to know they really do love. On this Sunday, they love each other. The debate continues as the conversation between our insiders continues on Twitter. Check out their Twitter handles and give us your opinion. And stay up to date with Laura, Abdul, Jennifer, and Mary Beth throughout the week. Coming up, the push to get people covered under the Affordable Care Act. I take questions directly to the head of the federal HHS next on Indianapolis This Week. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. Let's talk about health care coverage and a looming deadline under the Affordable Care Act. Monday is the deadline to sign up for coverage beginning January the 1st. And federal officials are touting there are 68 plans available in the Indianapolis area compared to just 18 this year. That's one point that HHS Secretary Sylvia Matthews-Burwell stressed when we talked to her about health insurance signups.
What that reflects is there's more choice for consumers so that they can find the plan that's best for them, both in terms of benefits and affordability.
So what will be that benefit then to Hoosier families who still may be a little bit confused about where to go and how to do all of this? This may be somewhat overwhelming. How do I know that it's a good thing for me if I'm a Hoosier mom or dad?
So if you're a Hoosier mom and dad, I think the thing that's most important is making sure that you have the health security and financial security you need that's related to health care. And for those who are already enrolled, need to come back, re-enroll, and make sure they get the best plans for them. For those who are currently uninsured in the state, what they should do is come to the marketplace and shop and find out that they can find a plan that is affordable for them, because there is financial assistance. So 78% of the current enrollees in Indiana can get plans for $100 or less. And so folks need to come in and find out and get that kind of security they need, both from a health perspective and the finances that come with health care costs.
And Madam Secretary, can you talk about the assistance that is available for families who may think this is very expensive, or they may have so many other ideas, but there is assistance that is available, correct, for families who may not be able to afford the entire price?
And that's correct, and that's how you get to those $100 or less costs. And that's because for people who come in, what you do, you can actually go to window shopping and basically put in your income and put in your zip code, and then you can shop and understand basically what it would be in terms of your premium and your deductible. And what you see is there's financial assistance for many, many people. And last year, there was a large number, over 70% of people that received financial assistance to help with the cost of the premiums.
And ma'am, I'd like to ask you one final question that having to do with Indiana's Medicaid waiver request. Is your office close to making a determination one way or the other on the state's request?
We're continuing to work constructively with the governor, and that is something that we're engaged in and continuing to work on.
And we'll continue to follow that developing story, but here's where you can help with signing up for health insurance. The Enrollment Assistance Center is on West 56th Street. It's open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And remember, Monday is the deadline to have coverage starting January the 1st, but you can still sign up through February the 15th. Indianapolis This Week returns right after this. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. This week, we watched a lame duck Congress battle over a spending bill to keep the government open. But is lame duck really a bad thing? Our Scripps partners at Decode DC say sometimes more work gets done in a lame duck session. We've even found that a large share of Congress' total output gets passed during the lame duck time. You can read that full article in our Decode DC section. Look in the news section of our website, theindychannel.com, and on the RTV6 app. Thanks for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. I'm Rafael Sanchez. Have a great Sunday.